Now let's begin with the internal structure or the histology of the human gut, which you also call as the alimentary canal. So in journal there are 4 layers. We have serosa, muscularis, submucosa and mucosa. The 4 layers are namely, remember, we have serosa, muscularis, submucosa and mucosa. You can also call muscularis as the muscular coat, right. Now under serosa we have a visceral peritoneum and subserosa. Under muscularis or the muscular coat we have 3 different types of muscle layers. We have a longitudinal muscle layer, circular muscle layer and the oblique muscle layer, right. Oblique muscle layer is in the case of stomach only, it is not there in the case of esophagus and intestines. So oblique muscle layer is present in case of stomach only. Then we have submucosa and mucosa. In mucosa we have the epithelium, lamina propria and the muscularis mucosa. Now let's begin with the histology of the human gut. As I told you, serosa actually forms the outermost layer. Serosa forms the outermost layer and it is, you can say, the first layer. Okay. Now the cavity of this alimentary canal, this internal structure of the cavity, it is known as lumen. So the cavity of this alimentary canal at the center, it is known as what? It is known as lumen. Then after serosa we have which layer? We have muscularis. Now this muscularis or this muscle layer, it is formed of the smooth muscles. We have first of all the longitudinal muscle layer and inner to this the next layer, that is made of circular muscle layer. And in case of stomach we have another muscle layer that we call as the oblique muscle layer, right. So in case of muscularis, firstly we have the longitudinal muscle layer, then we have the circular muscle layer, and then in case of stomach we have the oblique muscle layer, and this oblique muscle layer is absent in case of the intestine and the esophagus. Then we have the submucosa. It is made up of this loose connective tissue layer with blood and lymph vessels. So in this submucosa the blood vessels are present, or you can say the lymph vessels are there. Then we have mucosa. Now mucosa is the innermost layer which is made up of secretory and absorptive cells, and in mucosa we have the epithelium, the lamina propria and the muscularis mucosa, and the cavity, as I told you, it is known as lumen. So the outermost layer which is formed of the fibrous tissue, and this is mostly areolar connective tissue, that is the serosa, made up of which tissue? Areolar connective tissue. Then we have the muscularis. The first layer is of the longitudinal muscle layer, as you can see. Then we have a circular muscle layer. Then we have the submucosa which is formed of loose connective tissue which has blood vessels and lymph vessels. So here we have blood vessels and lymph vessels in this mucosa layer. In this submucosa layer, and in the mucosa it is the innermost layer which is made up of secretory and absorptive cells, and the cavity, this center, this is what? This is the lumen. We name it as lumen. Now let's see the smooth muscle arrangement in the gut, right. Now in the intestine, smooth muscle forms 2 distinct layers, one running along, the other running around the organ. So together these layers cause wave-like peristalsis which propels the contents. Now the circular layer runs around the intestine and its contraction causes segmentation. The longitudinal layer runs along the intestine, it causes wave-like contractions. So let's read this again. You can see in this image that we have a circular smooth muscle layer, right, and a longitudinal muscle layer. So in the intestine, this smooth muscle forms 2 distinct layers, one running along the outer, running around the organ. One is running along and the other is running around the organ. So together these layers, they cause wave-like peristalsis which propels the contents, means it pushes the contents to go inside. Then the circular layer runs around the intestine and its contraction causes segmentation, and the longitudinal layer runs along the intestine, it causes wave-like contraction. So this was about the smooth muscle arrangement. You need not to go into detail, this is just for your knowledge, right. Then next, here you can see the three-dimensional view of the layers of the stomach. We are here concentrating on the stomach. So again, I told you this is the journal, these are the journal 4 layers, and these will be the same when we talk about the alimentary canal. So we have serosa, then we have muscularis, submucosa and mucosa. Now in this image, where can you see the blood vessels? Well, you can see this blood vessels and lymph vessels over here. So where is this region? This region is what? This region is the submucosa part. This is the submucosa part which is having the blood vessels and the lymph vessels, and this is the mucosa which is having these folds. You can say these are those folds, right? They have many sort of secretory cells. So this is the mucosa, this is submucosa, muscularis and serosa. Now we will be actually drawing the 4 layers, or you can say the histology of the human gut, or we will be drawing the transverse section of the human gut. We are going to draw the transverse section of the human gut. Let's start with this. Well, as you know, the first layer, you can draw a circle like this, and the first layer, what is this first layer? The first layer is of actually serosa. So we have serosa, right? And then we have muscularis. We have a longitudinal muscle layer, circular muscle layer and oblique muscle layer in case of the stomach. So I am going to here just draw with a different pen. Here we have which layer? Firstly we have the longitudinal muscle layer, right? We have a longitudinal muscle layer. So you can just draw this like this, longitudinal muscle layer. So we'll just label this. This is the longitudinal muscle layer. And after this, actually we have a series of nerve fibers, that is the parasympathetic nerve fibers and the nerve cells. I'll just draw it in a way so that you actually have an idea that these are the nerve cells or the nerve fibers. Just draw it along with me on your notebook. Remember, whenever you draw the histology, whenever you draw, then only you'll come to know the layers. If you won't draw with me, then it will be quite difficult to actually understand. When I'm drawing this, you can draw it with me for better understanding of the layers, right? So we have, I told you, we have a series of these nerve cells or the parasympathetic nerve fibers, which we call as the Auerbach's plexus or the myenteric plexus. What is it? It is the Auerbach's, A-U-E-R-B-A-C-H, the Auerbach's plexus, or you can also call it as what? Myenteric plexus. Myenteric plexus. Now what does this do? It actually controls the peristalsis. It actually controls the peristalsis. Peristalsis is what? It is the contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the esophagus, that is your food pipe, which helps to push food inside the stomach, right? So this peristalsis movement are there in the rectum also, but they are the least. This peristalsis is least in case of rectum, right, and more in case of the esophagus. So this Auerbach's plexus, which is actually a series of this nerve fibers or the nerve cells, this actually regulates or controls the peristalsis. Next to this, we have a layer of cell, that is what? That is the circular muscle layer. We have next circular muscle layer. So here we will be having a layer of circular muscle. So here we have circular muscle layer. I can just label this here. This is what? This is the circular muscle layer, right? Then in case of stomach, there is one more layer that is present, that is actually what? That is the oblique muscle layer, but it is absent in case of the esophagus and in case of intestines. So in case of intestine and esophagus, you need not to draw the oblique circular layer, just draw the longitudinal and the circular muscle layer, right. After this, we have one more plexus that we call as the Meissner's plexus. This Meissner's plexus, that is also known as submucosal plexus. Meissner's plexus, that is also known as submucosal plexus. We'll just draw this again. This is again a collection of the nerve cells, or you can say the series of nerve cells or the sympathetic nerve fibers. These were the parasympathetic nerve fibers, and now we have sympathetic nerve fibers. Let's draw this. This is again a series of the nerve fibers, and this series of the nerve fibers, they are the parasympathetic, no, they are what? They are the sympathetic nerve fibers. We have the parasympathetic nerve fibers over here, right, and these are the sympathetic nerve fibers and the nerve cells which form what? They form the Meissner's plexus, MEISSNER''S. We have Meissner's plexus, which you can also call as what? The submucosal plexus. Submucosal plexus, right. And to this inside, we have what? We have the submucosa. We have submucosa. You can label this as submucosa. Now after this, just remember the function of this Meissner's plexus or the submucosal plexus. It actually regulates the secretion of the intestinal juices. This Auerbach's plexus regulates peristalsis, and this Meissner's plexus, it regulates what? It regulates the secretion of intestinal juices. Then innerwards to this, we have mucosa, and in mucosa, as you can see, we have epithelium, lamina propria and the muscularis mucosa. So here we have certain projections like this, right. They form the villi, and there are some secretory cells also, because this is the epithelium part. So we have this epithelium layer. Just draw it very carefully. We have an epithelium layer which is actually having what? Having the villi in case of intestines and some secretory cells, right. So this we are going to label as epithelium. Then we have the lamina propria and the muscularis mucosa. We have another layer that is known as lamina propria, and outwards to this we have the muscularis mucosa. Muscularis mucosa, and these are actually the regions of what? They are the regions of mucosa. So this is how you are going to draw the TS of human gut, that is a transverse section of human gut. And remember, if we talk about the blood vessels or the lymph vessels, they are present over here with the submucosa part. You can see in this 3D image that we have this serosa layer, right, which is just the base layer, and in this muscularis we have these muscles, these muscle layers, which are namely the longitudinal muscle layer, the circular muscle layer and the oblique muscle layer. They are the form of smooth muscles, right. After this we have submucosa. Here we have what? The blood vessels and the lymph vessels that are going to actually supply this blood, and they are forming the connection with the stomach in this layer, that is the submucosa layer, where we have, remember, the blood vessels and the lymph vessels. And you can see these projections, right. They actually form the mucosa layer, which is further divided into the epithelium, lamina propria and the muscularis mucosa. And here in this epithelium, we have many cells that are secretory in function, and in this epithelium, this also forms villi, and this villi actually help to increase the surface area of absorption. When the surface area of the absorption is increased, means more absorption will be there. So these folds or you can say this epithelium layer, which can also form the villi. They are going to increase the surface area of absorption, means more food will be absorbed. So, this is how the histology of human gut is, and we have here drawn the transverse section of the human gut and label these layers. Remember, the first layer is the serosa. You can also label it as visceral peritoneum. I told you what is peritoneum. It actually forms the lining of the abdominal cavity and the organs which are there in the abdominal cavity. But in case of esophagus, just remember that the serosa layer is absent. Okay, I will just write it here. In case of esophagus, what is absent from here? Serosa and the oblique muscle fibers are there in case of stomach. So, if you need to draw the TS of the esophagus, you have to draw just as it is, but remember that you need not to draw the first layer, that is a serosa layer, because this serosa layer is not there, and the oblique muscle layer need not to be drawn because this oblique muscle layer is only in the case of stomach. So, as a whole, if you are asked to draw the transverse section of human gut, you can draw it like this: serosa, then we have the longitudinal muscle layer, then we have this Auerbach's plexus, which we can also call as myenteric plexus, which controls peristalsis. Then we have the circular muscle layer, then we have the Meissner's plexus, which can also call as submucosal plexus, which helps in what? Regulating the secretion of intestinal juices. Then we have the submucosa, and we have the mucosa, which is composed of epithelium, lamina propria, and the muscularis mucosa. Now, I hope you can draw the TS of this human gut, because I have drawn it in a very simple way for your better understanding.